I'd be remiss if I didn't mention we have the beautiful and brilliant Tiffany here. I can't say we have a mutual friend because you know somebody that everybody wants to know right now. I don't want to ask you about it if you don't want to talk about it. So,
you can ask me about it.
Yeah, so I mean, I was in a similar position to Sam, probably. So we're talking about Sam Bankman-Fried, who's a personal friend of Tiffany's. And, I was in a bit of a similar situation. I know some other people that are in similar situations or have been or soon going to be. Regardless, it's a really, really tough place to sort of exist. Do we have an update on what's going on? Because I do notice that the court said he can't, which I think is wrong, by the way. The court said he can't do this and he can't do that.
I actually visited him like a couple of days ago because his bail conditions are changing to where it's going to be really hard for him to have visitors from here on. I don't know if it was difficult for you, but now I think he's going to have to sort of schedule things in advance, hire security to check and make sure no visitors bring in any electronics. He can't play League of Legends anymore. No more games for Sam. Apparently he can't use anything with any sort of chat feature. So he's going to be real lonely from here on out. Did you have all those sorts of restrictions when you were on house arrest?
I didn't. And I, like Sam, I kind of rapidly tried to, make things worse for myself, inadvertently. And I think that, thankfully for me, there was just so much damage I could do to myself. When your lawyers tell you don't talk anymore, or don't do this anymore, etc., you generally listen to them. But there's a lot of people, whether it's neuroatypical or just sort of built a certain way, that they just can't listen to authority or reason, and they learn the hard way. And I learned the hard way. I had my bail revoked for making a joke about Hillary Clinton. Unfortunately, somebody recently got an actual federal conviction for making a joke about Hillary Clinton. So, I was the cautionary tale, don't mess with Hillary. And this guy basically memed about, I think he said that, you shouldn't vote in person, go just vote with text message, which is, a pretty dastardly meme. And I can imagine how some people could be confused by that. And maybe some people stayed home because of that. And that's a crime. And this guy should go to jail for that. To me, there's a lot of that syllogism is quite slippery. I think that, certainly not an ethical, smart, nice thing to do, but, all the rest of those chains and that chain of thought, I don't agree with. And unfortunately, this guy is now a federal, felon. He was convicted in the same courthouse I went to. And again, there have been a lot of people who said very nasty things about other politicians, and they've never sort of gone to jail. This is sort of election tampering and election fraud, so I get it. It's important. But, I think that, what can I say? I don't like law enforcement in general, and I especially don't like it for stuff like this, where there isn't a tangible, palpable victim. Sam's case is interesting. It's very strange. I think that the restrictions on his freedom are ridiculous not because I like him or I think that he's not a criminal or whatever. I reserve judgment on all that stuff. He's presumed innocent until proven guilty, one. And that is something you can never forget. It sure looks like he's guilty of something, but again, he has to have a chance to say his piece. And there's a court of law that is supposed to be the place where he's supposed to do that. And we kind of hurt our own system every time we poke fun of that or we think it's a fait accompli that somebody's guilty. So I want to give him the benefit of the doubt that I would want, and I sort of didn't have, and he's probably not going to have, and all that. But I think that, the freedom part, until he goes to trial and is convicted, I think he should be free. I understand the flight risk concept. Sam Bankman is not going to be an easy man to hide in any country, and 𝗙𝗏𝗏 kind of proved that recently. There's never been somebody who's gone on the lam for a long time and was able to actually get away with it. And I had this fantastic attorney, Ben Brafman, who's still a close friend and still my attorney, who's been in the business for 40 years with all kinds of criminals, mob bosses, Puff Daddy, dignitaries, you name it. And when there was a question about my own bail, he said, look, have you ever seen a person successfully flee the country for a long period of time and evade the long arm of the law? And the people on the other side said, yeah, that's true. And then he said, and do you think my client, with his recognizable smirk, can really stay hidden? Yeah, that's right. And so to me, Sam Bankman would not be able to flee. He'd not be able to last 3 months anywhere. He's also not a cunning criminal. Like, there are people who are like slick, like, people I met in jail who are like, they're really slippery, dangerous people. Sam's not that. Sam's kind of a bit of a kind of like an idiot savant, right? Like, he's the kind of guy who will, not know how to tie his shoes, but know how to program, some really complicated, program. And that's why he's Sam. And I think that, he should not be restricted, because the main reason, in my opinion, is if you're restricted in your daily life, right, what happens when you actually have to serve your sentence? To me, that's sort of the real reason here. So he's going to do what, like a year, maybe 2 in this like confined state, but none of that counts for his actual sentence. So if, let's say he gets 10 years for argument's sake, if he does 2 years sitting at home, well, what does that count for? Half a year of prison? Is that 0 years of prison? What's often it's not 0 because he's not free, but he's also not in jail. So it's kind of like this messed up situation that I think is really kind of disgusting, because I think that time should either count for his jail time or he should just be presumed innocent. And the idea that he's a flight risk is preposterous. The guy, should be able to use a computer like anybody else. If he commits another crime while he's, on bail, they can take his bail away. I mean, there's a lot of ways to go about this. This is just sort of senseless punishment, I think, in my opinion.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And I also agree that he's not the slickest, most cunning criminal. And I've talked to him a bunch of times and asked him, like, were you ever interested in fleeing? He said he was never interested in fleeing.
Of course not, yeah.
Yeah, so I really don't think he's a risk for that.
I mean, I'd just say real quick that, it's the amount of pressure and stress that comes at you in this type of situation is pretty significant. And I think that for him, facing what he's facing, it's really significant. So I can't imagine, and if anybody could imagine, it would be me, but I can't imagine the kind of things he's going through that run through his head every day that make it difficult to sort of think through what the best decision is. I'm not trying to sympathize with him or excuse any of the allegations. What I'm just trying to say is provide some insight into what's going on in his head that may lead to bad decisions between now and his trial. It's just a frustrating experience to go through from the human side. I understand that, there are a lot of victims here that want answers, and maybe we want his head on a platter. And I'm not trying, like I said, to be on Sam's side. I'm not. I can understand that, like, he's probably going through a lot mentally, and that's pretty taxing. That you might see continuous weird behavior, and I think the courts may be doing him a little bit of a favor to keep himself from hurting himself kind of further. He went on like an innocence tour that didn't go very great. He sort of tried to start a substack and explain his innocence there. That didn't go so great either. And again, I'm not trying to laugh at him. I think that in a court of law is like there to convict you. It's like impossible to be found innocent. And here there's enough smoke that, it seems like the odds that he can wriggle out of this are virtually zero.
He doesn't actually regret doing his little apology tour. He doesn't think it went too poorly. Like, I think he thought that it went well, actually. If
you put yourself in his shoes, you got to do something, right? And that's the pressure is like, man, I got to do something. And, I can understand the weight of that pressure forcing you to then do something.
He's basically been saying that he doesn't feel that he's going to get a fair trial or, like, fair jury based on the current media environment. That's basically what he keeps repeating. So I think that's part of why he wants to sort of change the narrative in the public eye.
Yeah, he's also somebody that raised billions of dollars and made a national splash. So I think he probably feels like he could very much, do something similar. And who knows, maybe so. I think there's a lot of trust lost there that it'd be awfully hard for him to win anybody's hearts over. Once you mess up enough, most people will say, I don't really want to give this person, a second chance. And I think that's, kind of what he tried to do towards the end there was sort of be like, oh, I could fix this. And, I think that, there's, it's not clear that that was even possible. So again, it's a sad thing. I personally don't like to see anybody go to jail for a very long time. I don't think it makes a lot of sense. It's not going to bring the money back that everybody lost. I don't think it's a deterrent because these crimes still happen all the time, even though we give life sentences out like they're glasses of water. So it's not being an effective deterrent. It's doesn't teach the criminal a lesson in terms of like recidivism. That's been shown that the number of years somebody spends in jail has no impact on the likelihood of recidivizing and committing another crime. So, there is that sort of argument that the more you keep somebody in jail, the more you protect them from society, or you protect society from them, I should say. The problem with that is, I think people like Sam or Elizabeth Holmes, like, they're not exactly going to go jump into, a big new company anytime soon. It's hard for them to regain that trust and things like that, especially after sort of the media, sort of labeled them, the way they labeled them. So I feel like, for him to sit in jail for 30 years or 40 years or 50 years, something like that, or longer, who knows, is, that's a really, again, I don't feel bad for him necessarily, but I also feel like I don't think anybody really should go through that unless they were a violent criminal.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, I agree with you, although I'm like always reluctant with how I talk about all of this because I get death threats and I get like a lot of, in terms of like wanting to see someone in jail for life. I mean, I kind of only want to see that for violent criminals. I'm actually curious as to how long you think he's going to spend in jail.
I actually want to put this in GPT and see what it thinks, but I want to see how close it would get if you put all the criminal facts without the names and see if it actually was able to calculate it correctly.
That'd be interesting.
Yeah, I don't think he gets less. He gets at least 20. I mean,
yeah,
I think it'd be very, yeah.
He seems more optimistic about his odds than I would be. I mean, he still thinks there's like a shot that he gets nothing. So, I mean, who knows? But he seems more optimistic than I think the general public and how it looks to me.
Yeah, I mean, he would have more information, obviously, but from looking from the sidelines, I would just say it's extremely hard to get an acquittal. It's almost impossible. And I think that's a problem in the criminal justice system. Probably the government looks at it as a feature, not a bug. But I think that, yeah, once you're indicted, I mean, the odds, just the numbers are all you have to look at are the 90+% chance that you're going to prison. So, that's a very, very tough thing. It doesn't mean it doesn't happen. People do get acquitted, but it looks really, really tricky. And he keeps getting new charges like every day. So it's
yeah, I mean, he keeps getting new charges, and that's something he was surprised by. I think that, last time I spoke with him, he said that he was under the impression that if he agreed to extradition from the Bahamas, that new charges couldn't be added. I don't know if you're aware of that being.
Yeah, I mean, I happen to think prosecutors, they lie and cheat and commit crimes themselves, all the time. So, I think that, I wouldn't be surprised that they made him a promise that they didn't, keep. That's fairly typical type of behavior for government prosecutors. And the people involved in this case, what's amazing is how quickly they moved, right? From the date of the crime to the date of the arrest is typically several years because you have 5 years to actually make the arrest. You have a statute of limitations and you can collect evidence and you're supposed to do that. And they just grabbed them and said, okay, well, we have enough and let's do this. And, I think that maybe that's a new way of doing law, but I can tell you that in most other circumstances, they don't move that quickly. And I think they moved quickly here. I'm going to be very cynical for a second. The Southern District of New York wanted to have this case under their flag because if California had this case under their flag or the Eastern District in New York had this case under their flag, they would sort of look at the world a little bit differently as, oh, this is our guy, and anybody can bring the indictment. So it's kind of like a market share, mind share kind of thing, which is sort of sick and sad because it's a real person that deserves some benefit of the doubt. They deserve their day in court like everybody else. And who knows if he's got the smoking gun where he says, ha ha, here it is. None of you ever knew about this letter where I wrote, to my coworkers that, everything we're doing here is legal and I have a legal opinion and blah, blah, blah. And here's the smoking gun. Who knows if he has that? Who knows if he doesn't? Again, it looks, from an uneducated perspective, it looks pretty bleak, but, he has a chance to win. And the more charges that get added, sometimes that actually makes the case worse. All you need is really one charge to send somebody to jail. So for the government to add charge after charge after charge after charge kind of convolutes the case and maybe makes the jury wonder, like, what is this all about? Like, this is a little odd. There's bribery in here. There's all this other stuff. Like, this is like a movie, am I watching a movie or am I trying to figure out if this guy committed a crime? And I think it'll work for them as a strategy in the end. But I know in my case, when they added one extra charge to my case halfway through, we viewed it as a positive for us that like they were kind of like grasping at straws. It's clear that they're not grasping at straws here, that this looked like this extra charge here was pretty real, pretty scary. But sometimes if you can prove one of the charges, the jury gets very skeptical. The jury says, wait a second, and I lose faith in the prosecutor, I lose faith in the FBI, I can't believe anything they're saying. So that's a good strategy for a defense attorney. Generally, these additional charges don't work out well. And if you can pick just one of them apart and really fixate on that, you can sometimes get an acquittal by like showing the jury that the whole case is. I think 20 is the bare minimum in this situation. And again, I don't think it's if he's found guilty, I think it's a terrible thing that he did. But I also think that like you're his friend and he's allowed to have friends and your friends are allowed to make mistakes in life, right? Like it's not like it's illegal to make a mistake. It's not like it's illegal to be his friend or wrong. Like everybody deserves a friendship, love, things like that. And, if he makes this mistake, and he's made a terrible mistake, he should have the opportunity to redeem himself at least the best he can and apologize for it. And, it's not going to make the money back, but he deserves a chance to be human at least.
So for Sam specifically, since you think that, jail isn't really a great deterrent, would you say that, assuming that the allegations end up being correct and, he did lose $40 billion of depositors' money, et cetera, do you think that he should, just be like, oopsie?
I think so one good question is what's going to happen to Silicon Valley people? What happens to Lehman Brothers people, right? Those people lost a ton of money too. And it's not hard to label something as fraud, right? I mean, anytime somebody loses money, somewhere along the way, somebody lied, somebody did something that you could blame, somebody had poor judgment. I think here, you did have an actual, like, very deceitful situation, but I'm pretty sure the people at Silicon Valley Bank depositors were also pretty upset that, at least for a few days before the Fed stepped in, that, they were probably really pretty upset at the CFO and the CEO and board of directors at that company. And imagine there was no FDIC. You'd sit there and say, these people should go to jail. How could they possibly mismanage the bank this way? And that happened to Lehman Brothers. That happened to Bear Stearns. Nobody went to jail from those companies. So if I'm Sam, that's my argument. It's like, I run a financial institution. There's risk. We made mistakes. We didn't try to lose the money. We didn't steal the money. And that's the end of the day. That's what it is. Now, I think there's a lot of arguments against that's not, exactly right. There's a lot of issues with that. But I think that, there's a lot of issues with the bank system in general. I mean, I think it's a very unfair kind of system that has moral hazard, where there's an agency management problem where depositors' funds are basically used as fodder for gambling. They call them loans, but, they're really leveraged hedge fund positions. And if you work out those positions well, you get big bonuses and lots of cash. And if you don't, well, good luck, depositor. And I think the big delta there is, do you expect that risk? And do you expect any reward? Because if we all thought this was a hedge fund, well, I might as well at least gamble my money in a hedge fund because I'm going to get 80% of the profits and pay the manager 20%. FTX was a secret hedge fund where he got 100% of the profits, you got 100% of the downside, and you never signed up for that deal. And banks are typically, honestly, the same except for the FDIC guarantee. Right? If not for the FDIC guarantee, I would say that JP Morgan is just a big hedge fund that you unwittingly participate in fuel when you have an account at Chase. And, what do you think they pay their bankers and traders with? Your money, and if they lose it, well, it's your money they're losing. It's not their money. So to some extent, we can't do anything about it. Sam, obviously, if you take the allegations at face value, he committed some really terrible crimes and, he deserves to be punished for them. But I also don't, as somebody who's actually been to jail, I can tell you, I don't think anybody wins by putting this guy in jail for life. Maybe 10, 20 years, something like that. But there's no benefit to anybody by putting him in jail until he's dead or he's 70 years old.